Alright, I didn't intend to have a part 3, but I guess it's necessary here. Cats are absolutely freaking crazy. So they jumped on the computer here, they're chasing each other. I don't know if we're going to make it through today. The big thing is I can't kick them out of the attic. If I try and kick them out of the attic and close that door down there, they're going to freak the hell out because this is their room. So we're going to make the best of it. I apologize, but that's the world in this house. So aren't you glad that when we're in person I don't bring my cats to class? Think about that. All right. So Thomas, let's finish up then. So how does it become internalized? How does it become habitual? How might it change the reader? So that really is this assignment then. Let's move on and talk about Thomas Aquinas. Passions of the soul, experienced both by man and animal. Their acts, movements, effects that are caused by eternal objects. And this is why I keep returning to assignments that say, what is the triggering stimuli, right? Because that seems to be a tremendously important place to start. It differs in an important way, especially from the Stoics, though, that passions need not be entirely separated for reason, nor do they necessarily afflict the soul. So I think what we see Aquinas is opening up to take a more accepting position towards the passions, right? And being a little more nuanced about his interpretation of them. Reason can moderate the passions, both leading to moral or immoral activity. And I think that's a super important point, right? And we see that in today, right? And many people are walking that line, allowing their passions to direct them to do the right thing or to do the wrong thing, the moral versus the immoral. And not easily categorized as voluntary or involuntary. Maybe there's some combination of both. Maybe it's one in this case, the other in another context. So it really creates kind of a flexible, dynamic situation. And I think Kurt Lewin, who we'll talk about later in the course, can really resonate to this. Aquinas is working from Rushdie's interpretation of Aristotle's view, and it's probably more complex than Aristotle and his views. And for those of you who've gone, oh shit, more complex than Aristotle, power to you. I mean, some of these guys, this is what they do. They spend all their life thinking, and they can come up and they can be pretty complex about it. So, Aquinas, three souls then. We're back to the three-soul idea. The vegetative soul allows for basic existence, would even be found in plants, and we've discussed that idea in a previous lecture. The sensitive soul, present in man and animal, sensation, perception, movement, irrational, where the passions are located, and we might substitute the word affect there. Let's get familiar with that, using that term. And then the intellectual soul is present in humans only and responsible for thinking and reason. And we've backed previously off on that idea because there might be some pretty high-level mammals that engage in those possibilities beyond just human beings. So while passion exists in the sensitive soul, passions have a sequential nature. And what does that mean? What does that look like? Well, the sensitive soul apprehends, that is, engages in the process of sensation. The sensitive soul, appetite, is attracted or repelled, and that may be more akin to perception. So we see this dividing line. Sensation, of course, is bringing in the transduced energy that's been processed and represented now as neural energy in the brain. It goes to a brain center, and then it's evaluated, right? And that's part of the process of perception, and a negative or positive tag might be associated with it that is akin to being attracted or repelled in this regard. So the concupiscible is the easily obtained or avoidable, focused on so love, desire, joy, pretty easy to get into. Hatred, avoidance, sorrow, and I think what we might be looking at here, and I wouldn't go overboard on this, I'm thinking about this, but the concupiscible might be more akin to basic emotions, and the irascible then might be more conceptual, might be more theoretic, or might be more complex, and we see then hope, right? And hope is that it doesn't appear that this will work, but I hope it can, and there may be a means to get there. We got a whole lecture out on hope, so it's a complex process, right? despair, good is impossible. But that means we've analyzed an awful lot of options to understand that good is not likely possible, and then we enter into a state of despair. Notice this is probably not an automatic emotion that arises. It's probably an emotion that occurs over a lengthy cognitive process, right? Daring, audacity, approaching evil. Rather than rashness, fear then and anger might in fact make this more difficult than conversation, and I'm getting out onto a limb here that I can't readily defend. But notice I'm working on Aquinas' ideas, and certainly not my own. So the concussable, irascible allow for conflicting passions in a process of deliberation. And how many of you have had conflicting emotions? I don't know how I feel about this. Let me think about it is often how we approach that, right? And so Aquinas allows the complexity and kind of our nuanced responding. We use our estimate of power through apprehension to determine goodness or badness of a stimulus. And notice that a stimuli can be registering as good or bad automatically. You know, attitude researchers have demonstrated that an attitude object has a tag attached to it that is generally positive or negative, the evaluative component. And when we look at like the implicit association test, the IAT, right, is testing for that non-conscious negative or positive tag, essentially. So we use the estimate of powers then to consciously determine this if we so choose. And for animals, this is largely instinctual and a process of training, right, and experience. For humans, reasons available. Our cogitative powers then represent the application of abstract concepts. Refining the process, in modern terms, our ability to mentally represent and to manipulate our sensory experience. And that's something that probably lower animals don't have that capacity, or higher animals likely do, and it makes for a more nuanced but complex emotional experience. It makes the relationship of stimuli to ultimate emotional response a very convoluted path with many potential variables affecting it. So Aquinas' cardinal virtues, and think about the Stoics here if you will: prudence, justice, temperance, courage. Wow, sounds pretty similar in the list, doesn't it? These are construed as habits that are a result of experience in the struggle of reason and passion. So even if we go all the way back to being the charioteer and having the horse pull us in each way, it's our experience, right? Our life experiences and what we learn from those life experiences that facilitate this process. And Aquinas is saying the contemplation of the Scripture, and notice Scripture might then fill the role of poetry, you know, if we were talking Eden Sina, this is the process of struggle, and the acquisition of virtues is largely a function of the path we follow. So it does put a tremendous burden on us to exercise contemplation, to be aware of what we do, how we behave, how we evaluate that conceptually, and taking that all together to kind of improve our relationship to the world, right? So the man has free choice to the extent that he is rational, is what Aquinas believes. And so our free will really derives from our ability to use reason. And those who use reason to a less degree, then it would follow are demonstrating less in the manner of free will. Okay? So homework 2, number 3. So again, your choice. So this one's going to be about Aquinas, and it's the role of contemplation, especially as it affects the soul of the appetite, right? So consider Aquinas' 4 virtues. That's our starting point. How might they be acquired and enhanced by becoming mindful of the struggle between passion and reason through contemplation? So here I am, I'm conflicted, right? I got this passion arising in me, but I've got reason, you know, kind of trying to mitigate the effects or enhance the effects of the passion, right? But notice the process is metacognitive, that is, I'm looking at how I'm functioning here through contemplation. While Aquinas suggested contemplation of the Scriptures, let us, for this purpose, not confine ourselves to just contemplation of the Scriptures. I'd like to broaden it to contemplation of our existence and the contemplation of the struggle. It may be for you informed by the Scriptures. It may be informed by you by your general philosophy. It may be informed by you by your wants and needs, right? So contemplation of this struggle then might be sufficient substitute for this assignment. So give an example of a real world struggle for each of the 4 virtues. So you go back, you take prudence, justice, temperance, courage in your life, and then or use a fictitious person or someone else, right, and then describe the nature of the struggle, right, of these virtues and how contemplation ties to having some gain from the struggle. And that's what this is about with Aquinas. Struggle is the deal, and to the extent that you use reason and contemplate the struggle, you should demonstrate gains as a result of the struggle. So I want to go back, right? You know, the deal is virtues then, according to Aquinas, largely a function of the path we follow, or is it the path we construct? And I'm going to close here with the path I constructed. This is one of the first kind of brickwork things I've ever done, and I really enjoyed taking the time to construct this path, to visualize it, to cut the stones, to painstakingly fit them. When they didn't fit, pull them up and recut them or exchange them for another. But all this had to be built on a very solid base, and everything had to be done just one step at a time. And I think if we're going to gain from the struggles in our life, it really is us creating our path and moving along that path. So that's it for number 2. We're going to move into the future, a little further into the future, which will still be the past, in lecture 3. Thanks, guys.